Yeah. That's interesting. I can't make it move. Here we go. Hooray. And there's also a disclaimer, which is, we are not experts on Antarctica, nor have we been to more than an extremely tiny part of an entire continent. So it's not like saying, here's an introduction to England, and we just happen to have spent an afternoon in London. So, but we got really lucky. We were able to go there and we got lots of pictures, and I just hope you can enjoy them. Well, the first thing that's important to notice is that Antarctica is a very isolated place in many ways. So this one is taken not from the usual direction from which you observe your globe and your map, but smack from the South Pole, and you can see that it's surrounded by blue stuff, which is water. And basically, you can't get there from here without a lot of trouble. And as a result, for many millennia, or actually many millions of years, there have been no people, well, there weren't any people, but large animals that could go up into the Arctic regions, they weren't going to be able to get to Antarctica. So everything that's there is stuff that is happy in that blue stuff in the water. And once people started exploring all over the place, it took them a very, very long time to get to Antarctica also. And it's because of that Southern Ocean that's there. Because if you are a sailor, which we have been, you know that the blue does not represent everything between one piece of land and another piece of land. There's wind, there's waves, there's current, and the Southern Ocean has them all. And because of that, even the master mariners like the Polynesians never got there. You'll see a picture or two of the Southern Ocean soon, and you will see why. No one in their right mind is going to take a boat into it. So in the Southern Ocean, everything out here just keeps going round and round. There's nothing to stop it. The prevailing winds keep driving the currents and the waves, and the longer the wind is blowing on the water, the bigger the waves get. And there's nothing to stop them from getting pretty big. So actually, despite a lot of exploration in the sort of 17th and 18th centuries, no one, as far as we know, actually saw any of Antarctica until about 1820. Wow. Because when they were going through the place where you might have, yes. Oh, terribly sorry. The place where you might have expected, where you might have expected somebody to get close would be going around the tip of South America. People, when they could, went through the Straits of Magellan because they didn't want to go around Cape Horn because it was really scary. But in the early 19th century, there were a lot of people taking boats down into that part of the world because they were whaling. And those are the people, it seems, who first saw and started to exploit Antarctica. Almost as soon as they knew it was there, they started hunting seals, they started hunting whales, which is why later on I'll say, well, these were almost extinct, but now they're coming back. And then only in the late 19th century did you start having real exploration, not of the little islands around the fringe of Antarctica, but Antarctica itself. And that was, they call this the heroic age of exploration, because you had to be really brave to do this. And in fact, not everybody made it at home. So this is like pictures from the heroic age. This is the Shackleton's boat, the Endurance, in good shape and on its last keel. It got stuck in the ice while they were trying to get onto the mainland of Antarctica and do a cross Antarctic reach to the South Pole. They never even got onto the land. They got stuck in the ice, they got smashed up, and luckily they made it home. They all made it home, which is amazing. Well, this is not how we wanted to go. Okay, we did it the easy way. And we, as someone said, we went with National Geographic. They're one of several groups that have tours that you can take for too much money. But we were on, but it was worth it. Okay, we were on what is a pretty big ship. By cruise boat standards, it was not a big ship, but it was big enough. About 150 passengers. We flew down to Buenos Aires, huh?
That's a nice size.
It's a nice size. What you want is a boat that will survive going across the Southern Ocean, and you will, but you don't want it so big that you don't have a chance to get off and see all kinds of things. So eventually we were flown down to Ushuaia, which is the southernmost city, they claim, in the world. There's some towns that are a little further south. Got on the ship and off we went. I'm not going to show you pictures from Tierra del Fuego. It was really terrific because that's a whole other story. But it was a pretty amazing thing. So we headed off down into the Southern Ocean, and we spent about a day and a half to get there. The ship had stabilizers, which is really a good thing. They weren't enough. So now we're going to see if the video works. Yeah, so the video's working. And this is looking from our cabin. We were about 15 feet up. Of course, it got nice and wet. You're looking up at the waves, you notice. Excuse me. Okay. So it was wonderful. They had this bowl full of seasickness pills that you didn't even have to go into the medic. They would just take one. Okay. Right. And out there in the ocean, we didn't see much in the way of animals. But we did see albatrosses, which of course are famous for hanging out in the ocean in horrible places. Finally, when we were almost there, approaching the South Shetland Islands, which are just off the tip of the Antarctic Peninsula, we saw this gigantic iceberg, and they stopped there for a while so we could look at it, and not just to see how humongous it was. This one had been floating around for about 10 years, and it was about the size of Manhattan, they said, but no restaurants. And the reason that we went there was, and there's some more chunks are constantly falling off of this, very impressive. Krill is the basis of everything in that part of the world. Either you eat krill, well, okay, the animals we saw, there's lots of stuff going on way down underneath, but that is not what we have any pictures of. The animals that we saw, the whales, seals, tons and tons of penguins, either they eat krill or they eat the guys who eat krill, okay? And some of them do both. Okay, so these things are apparently some of the largest amount of biomass in the world is krill, and a huge amount of it is eaten. Anyway, there's a krill economy out there. What we saw by the iceberg were not just a few whales, but like herds of whales. And they were humpbacks. So you could actually see humpbacks sometimes right in this area. They've been seen out by Sandy Hook and New York Harbor, and Larry saw one from our boat, last fall or something? Yeah.
Keensburg.
Keensburg. Okay, so they're the whales. They're about 50 some feet long, just kind of medium for a big whale. We saw other whales that were even bigger, and their job is to eat krill. So sometimes they just kind of open their mouths, then they close it. They have this whalebone, the baleen, and they squeeze the water out. The krill stays behind, down it goes. And this is called lunge feeding, where they're kind of on their side and they just grab huge amounts of krill. Everybody's going to be much happier. Sorry. Plumbers, whatever. Yeah. Okay. Enough of that. We are going to finally get to land. And the first land we got to was in the South Shetland Islands, which is here. The islands themselves are just off the end of the Antarctic Peninsula.
But they're considered part of Antarctica.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's where the penguins are. You know, once you're in the
Nobody else
penguins,
claims it?
huh?
No one else claims it?
No, no one else. And it's, I believe it's covered by all the Antarctic trees and things like that. So they took us ashore and, but no, they didn't take us ashore. They're going to show us all kinds of good stuff. Now, this picture is from 1822, when people were first going to the South Shetland Islands and, you know, killing animals. But, you know, they were within a very short time of discovering these places, they were exploiting them to the best of their ability. So they took us onto Zodiacs and drove us around so we could see leopard seals. So this is what it was like floating around on these things.
Water's very calm there.
Yes, once you got close enough to Antarctica, two things happen. One, it stopped going up and down. And the other is that the currents were actually going in the other direction.
I noticed that on the map.
Yes.
There were two different directions.
And it had an interesting consequence for some people later on. Okay, so that's what we saw. That's how we floated around. This is the leopard seal. And the leopard seal is a rather large seal. And it has two kinds of teeth. One is for catching penguins and seals, other seals, and so on. And the other one is so that it can eat krill, because, you know, there's always krill. And there it is.
Aww.
Up close. Yes, isn't it adorable? You should see the teeth on this thing. Okay, and I think, and here we are actually looking back at from the Zodiac at the ship, which is somewhere back here. We seemed like a very far away from the ship. We seemed like we were in a big place. Anyway, finally we went ashore when we were in the Weddell Sea, which is a little to the east of the tip of the Antarctic Peninsula. And so they took us ashore to this place called Brown's Bluff. One thing you notice about it is we're going to see a lot of penguins that have been breeding there, but you notice that it's bare soil or rocks. There are three kinds of penguins in this part of Antarctica. There's, and we'll see them all, there's the Gentoo, which are kind of the biggest of them. And then there's the Adelie, which is a little smaller and very pugnacious. And then the Chinstrap, which is, you know, the cute one with, looks like it's wearing a helmet. But they all nest on bare rock. And so they have to find places like this. And sometimes they have to climb up to find those places. So this is where we were going to go. These are the two kinds of penguins. The Adelie is a little plainer. The Gentoo, you can tell because it's got this orange beak. But they seem to kind of all hang out together. And it's, you know, it's not exactly a scenic place. Plant life in Antarctica is notoriously missing. There's a few little, you know, mosses and things and lichens and such. So this one is going to show us getting ready to go ashore. And it's just a bunch of people in these orange things, you know, Okay, let's look at penguins. So these are young ones. These are young gentoos here, and you can tell that they are hungry. The parents both go out, they get a lot of krill, and then they dump it back into the young ones. And if the young ones are not fully satisfied, they keep chasing after the adults. They're kind of like people. Okay, and so here they are all swarming around. If you've ever seen more young ones, the young ones have this little fuzzy, the ones you see have a sort of a fuzzy top knot, because you're not going to see, when we went, we were in February, and we were not going to see those cute little chicks on the nest because they were all grown up. They're sort of teenagers. They hang out in gangs. They have funny hairdos because they're molting, and they sometimes are very naughty. And then on the other hand, they wait until their parents come home and feed them. So just like people. Okay. And what am I seeing here? It's very hard to do this upside down.
You can,
End of the video.
no, on the computers.
Yeah, okay. So here we are. This is Larry with his giant camera taking pictures. They were very bold. They don't seem to have any fear at all. They just walk up to you and say, you know, have you got krill? And as I said, they chase after the other ones. One thing that it is impossible to capture in a photograph is the way it smelled. Can you imagine thousands? There were thousands of penguins all bringing krill ashore, and yeah, it smells the way you think it might. And
What's the temperature of the air?
it was kind of like it is. It was around just below freezing. It was not terribly cold. Remember, you see open water, so it can't be that cold.
Oh, this is summer there.
And it's summer. It was February, which is kind of the equivalent of August. And I don't think it was ever terribly cold. Sometimes it was, windy and felt kind of rough, but it was perfectly comfortable. And here are these young guys. You can see these are Adelies. They've got these remnants of their fuzz. They stay on the nest or around the nest for about a month, and they molt and they molt, and then they just sort of wander around in the colony.
Squawking?
Yes, they make a lot of noise and they stink, but they're really cute. And then they have sort of another month of getting themselves all together, and then they're on their own. Their first year, not that many of them survive, but if they make it through the first year, they have a lifespan of about 15 years or so. So they do okay.
Videos from the Weddell Sea.
Videos from the Weddell Sea. Okay, so this is just a various creatures you see. Everything's weird when you see it upside down. What you might notice is that a lot of the penguins are scooting down on their bellies. For going downhill, it's very fast. And in some places there were like almost toboggan runs where all those penguins have done that. These are the orcas. That we saw a lot of orcas. Let me do what orcas do. And then this is kind of the places that we went. That's the shadow of the boat on a big pile of ice.
Nice photo.
Okay, and now, so we continued on in the Weddell Sea, and the first thing is, I wanted you to notice that, if you could see it from this distance, that the orcas are not black and white, they're black and kind of yellow.
Huh.
And we were told that's because diatoms, microorganisms are growing on their skin. And where it's cold, they don't seem to shed. And then if they go off to warmer water, they kind of whiten up again.
Huh.
So this is, this is what happens when you stay cold. Okay. And of course, these these creatures are staying as far away from orcas as they can. Almost every big ice floe that we saw had penguins on it. They would they go out hunting and they get a rest because nobody's hunting, nobody's eating them when they are up on the ice. They're very, very safe. The chicks are not necessarily safe because some large birds of prey that will get them. But once they're an adult, they're pretty safe up on the
It's the
ice.
seals that eat the penguins?
In the water, the seals eat the penguins, the orcas eat the penguins. Yeah. In the on the ice, I don't think the seals would go after them on the ice, even the ones that go up there. So they're pretty safe. It's only there are these birds of prey called skuas, and they will prey on the chicks. And then we went on to this other island, Paulette Island, which is kind of very, very interesting. As you can see, it's penguins as far as you can possibly see. And they just go on. Apparently, there's like as many as 100,000 pairs will nest on these islands. And again, all the young that you see are half grown. This is the Adelie penguin, and it is, it kind of frustrated some of the early explorers. It says here, their whole attitude expressed, what is it? Devouring curiosity and pig-headed, what is it?
Disregard for their own safety.
Disregard for their own safety. Some of this is from explorers who had dogs with them. And apparently the penguins go up to the dogs and, look around every now and then. The dogs would get them. But I think it's because they didn't have any, predators on land.
No fear.
And yeah, and some of the explorers were rather dismayed at their behavior, which they called hooliganage. But, they were these British upper class fellows.
No.
That's
the
the projector going
That's
down.
Yeah. So Paulette Island was really interesting, not just for penguins, but for history. During this period of exploration, right a little after like 1900, lots and lots of, they were scientific explorations, a lot of them. They weren't just to say, we put our feet here. They measured everything and temperatures of water and currents and everything. And there was a Swedish one where they got stuck in the ice again. Well, this is actually before Shackleton. They got stuck in the ice and they knew their boat was going down because it was getting smashed. They loaded everything they could into their, I think they called it whale boats, like lifeboat things. And they hauled it 25 miles across broken ice and whatever to this island, and built a hut and lived in it for the entire winter. And all but one of them survived. They ate over 1,000 penguins.
Tastes like chicken.
Apparently, nobody ever wanted to eat penguin again. And then they were rescued. It was known they were there because others from the same expedition actually were intentionally staying over the winter. So there they were, and they did get rescued, and we saw the hut, and it must have been awful.
What's the hut made of?
It was made out of rocks, but remember, they had brought everything from the boat. So they had a lot of provisions from the boat, and I suspect they brought wood and canvas and things like that, because there's no wood here that you could possibly use to build a roof. Okay, and they also had their boats and things. So even during that time, they did some scientific observations. They found, for example, fossils and things in this area because it wasn't always as it is. And what was interesting to me is 10 years later, after Shackleton's boat the Endurance was smashed up and they were stuck, they thought they were going to end up, as the ice drifted, they thought they were going to make it to Paulet Island. And Shackleton knew that there were provisions there because he had helped provision the boat that was used to rescue these other guys 10 years before. They didn't make it though. The currents took them the wrong place and they were in this really awful spot. But they all got rescued too. Okay, now I'm just going to go through some scenery because I found that this place was unbelievably
Beautiful.
mesmerized. Yeah, it was beautiful, but there will be a quiz at the end. Huh?
Very stark.
Very, very stark, as you can see. Remember, there are no trees.
What's it?
Very little color.
Well, there's color, but that's the thing that I find very interesting. There's color, but it is a very limited range of color. It's lots of blues because as you look at light going through ice, you see blue. And then there's grays and browns, but there's no red except the krill spill. The other thing about penguins is that if the krill spills out, the chick doesn't bend over and get it. It just left there, right there. Okay, so as you can see, it just goes on, and it's very mountainous in this area. Some of these mountains are over 5,000 feet high, from sea level, and we're on the water, so they're pretty big. And one thing that you noticed is that at those latitudes, the sunset is very, very slow. It just takes hours, and you can watch the light changing. I mean, I'd go again, even with the Southern Ocean. And the colors are any kind of blue you like, I think. And then, you get the colors from the sunset. And it goes on. And there's our boat against our shadow again.
That's such a clever photo.
Anyway, now we did some kayaking. They took us into a very, very quiet place because they like return customers. And there's something called pancake ice that forms as it's beginning to freeze up in these calm places, and it was all full of pancake ice. So they gave us these extremely stable kayaks, and we got to paddle around. It was really interesting. I think this is
Beautiful here. Wow, your hand's getting wet.
but they're not cold.
You're a good rower.
Yeah, he took the pictures. I did the paddling. That's okay. I don't mind.
I don't think I want to go through that tunnel.
Picture in the water. You used a GoPro, right? Underwater. Yeah. So that was really cool.
They also make you wear life jackets anytime you leave the.
Absolutely. Not only did they make you wear life jackets, they made you check out and check in. And if they didn't see that you had checked in, they were going to find you.
Accountability.
Yeah, right. One thing I didn't mention as we were going ashore is that each time we went ashore, we had to walk through a bath of disinfectant. We had these high boots because we'd have to get off of the Zodiacs into not very deep water, but into water. And so we had these high boots. And there are protections in Antarctica, and you cannot contaminate it. So they would disinfect us each time we went through. They also allowed only a certain number of people ashore at a time. I suspect if it had been when the chicks were on the nests, we would have been much more restricted. So, and this is what people were seeing in this spot. Okay, more wildlife. So the orcas, we saw a lot of orcas. They know the orcas, this the same ones come back over and over again. They have long lifetimes, and you could tell them because of the shape of their different ones have different fins, have had more or less damage to them. And what we saw was that the humpbacks did not like the orcas. Orcas will attack young ones, and they were rolling around and flapping these giant flippers of theirs at the orcas. I think there's an orca somewhere in this picture.
There's a toothed whale.
Or yes,
Yes, I don't
the
know.
the orcas are the killer whales,
Okay.
and they're really pretty fierce. And so they mobbed the orcas. We watched it for quite a while, and finally we just watched until the orcas got fed up and left for better hunting grounds. Okay, more of scenery, and then wanted to show you a little bit on yet another island. These are fur seals. They were almost extinct after it was about a century of hunting. But then when the hunting stopped, they came back.
I thought they were gray or silver, but these are black, huh?
This is what they look like. They're not like a regular seals. I think they're more related to sea lions. They're more agile on land. You can tell from the way their flippers work. And again, we did a lot of penguins. This time there was snow by the water, and the penguins were not going to nest there. They climbed up these hills. And here they are up, penguins are pretty good climbers. And this was a mixture of the gentoos we saw before and also chin straps. So this is the chin strap one. They're a little smaller, and they're all very, very closely related. And this is the ratty looking in the middle of molting young one. And you notice that they've got stains of red down their front.
Bibs.
That's
They needed a
that's
bib.
from spilling krill. And they do this back we go, porpoising as they swim. So it's almost like seeing a group of porpoises. Probably also keeps them from being eaten as easily. And these, of course, are, this is another kind of seal. Here they are, and these seals are actually trying not to be eaten by orcas. They have the weirdest teeth I have ever seen. They had these teeth on the boat. I kept looking at it saying, what on earth would anybody want with a tooth like that? Well, it turns out that it's for straining krill. You open your mouth, you grab some water, you close it, and then you squeeze the water out from those holes, and what's left is krill, and then you eat the krill.
Huh, so the krills are that big?
The krill
Yeah,
they're not like teeny weeny things. They're like
Are they shrimp-like?
they're shrimp-like, and they're about
Inch?
centimeter, inch size. They vary.
Some of those teeth look like the fossil teeth we're picking up out of the reminiscence.
Huh?
It's sort of triangular, sort of weird thing.
Well, they're triangular, but they've got all these very strange indentations in them. Anyway, these seals were trying not, they were trying very hard not to be caught by orcas. So here's an orca, here's a seal. And the orcas were we were not in, obviously, we're not in that zodiac, but they were orcas very close. And
They're not that big, the orcas, as opposed to the humpbacks.
they're much, much smaller than humpbacks, but they're very big.
Big
They're what,
as
like
in
20 feet long?
Well, do they
20
bite,
versus
do
100
they
feet.
bite the rubber of the zodiacs?
They did not.
Well, that's good. But do
Um,
they?
I don't think it would taste good.
If they did, you'd be in trouble.
Yeah, right. We actually had a whale study group on the boat. And they were taking tissue samples from orcas. Using a dart at quite a distance. Anyway, during this time, actually, an orca did get a seal. And I think the people, we didn't see it, but the people in the Zodiac group, they were kind of traumatized. And the penguins, again, they do their best to get out of the way of these guys. Okay, almost done. So you won't go forever. We were lucky. We got to stop at the Palmer station, which is part of NSF, and they that was as far south as we got. In fact, we never made it to the Antarctic Circle, so you've definitely got everybody beat. And this was us going ashore. You'll notice there's a lot of ice. The ice was kind of getting blown into the bay. And this is the Palmer Station. It's not an architectural show place, but it's very functional. It has, I don't know, I think about 40 people in the summer and about half that in the winter. They do all kinds of measurements. They monitor plant life. They're trying to understand, climate change things and so on. You notice this guy is helping to pull the Zodiac, and he was he was the leader of the National Geographic tour, and he's showing off. He was really strong. He was also, I think, a marine biologist. They were not just,
What was his name?
Jimmy, right? He was Jimmy, but I don't remember his last name.
Australian.
He was Australian.
I think
He was
we
trying.
had him pulling Zodiacs around in Tahiti.
Yeah. He went all over the place.
He was like a Mack truck.
Yeah, the same guy. Okay, so they took us ashore. This is our thing saying, hey, we were really there. Okay, big deal. And we were toured around, which was interesting to see. A lot of it is how do you survive in a place like this? Obviously, the food has to be brought in.
Do they have a ping pong table?
They had a lot of good stuff. So this is their little kitchen place, when of course food is very important in places like that, and getting together. And I think they were happy to see us, because after a while, when you're spending months with the same 40 people, anybody new is really fun. And so we were chatting. I was chatting with one of them, and we did the usual, where are you from, whatever. And I told him where I was from, and he said, Homedale. He said, oh, you've got the antenna. Okay, so I know that some people here are trying to do things about saving the antenna. Just remember that it is not just a local thing. Nobody would have said that if I had said I was from Keyport or Middletown or even Rumson. So I felt kind of good about that. He had actually worked at the South Pole, and I think he did. He was electronics guy. I think he did some instrumentation for something that you had done. You were working on. So, it wasn't like just anybody knowing about the antenna. So anyway, we had to go through the ice to get back. And then we headed back across the Southern Ocean again.
You get sick again?
Larry got sick on the way out. I got sick on the way back. A lot of people the meals were not heavily attended during that time.
How long did it take to get back?
About a day and a half. Yeah, it's not like a huge thing, and by that time we were kind of getting used to the whole thing. We were able to go up on the bridge and see everything that was going on, and it was really quite exciting. Finally ended up, we're going to go to Cape Horn, right by Cape Horn, where everybody gets scared. And then we were going eventually to go back in through the Beagle Channel to good old Ushuaia. And here's Ushuaia, back to the real world where they have plants and, mice and all kinds of stuff like that. So I just wanted to say that even though Antarctica is tremendously isolated, it isn't. There are many things being done to protect it, There are treaties that require people to behave nicely there, not leave garbage. There's no hunting. You cannot exploit the whatever might, resources might be there. It's only for scientific study, and everybody is nice to everybody else because they're so cold. But it is not isolated. This was the November Scientific American talking about how fast now some of the ice is melting. What we do here does affect what happens there. And of course, what happens there will affect what's going on here. That is a whole other story, and I am not going to take your time, but it's worth thinking about it. And that's pretty much it. Any questions? And I very much apologize for this complete mess.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. I also apologize for all the technical glitches that we had. But
I will be speaking with Bob.
if you live in town, there is a good chance that CILU has had a positive impact on your quality of life due to our activism in defense of Homedale's natural resources. If you like what is happening and get involved in your community, please consider joining us if you haven't already. You can join on our website, www.homedale-cilu.org. Presentation was recorded.